At this stage in the awakening spiral, we begin to get really excited about the opportunity to create, to explore. And sometimes that can feel also a little bit scary, like there's a lot to take on. So we are meeting quantum physicist Philippe Brouillard for his very structured guidance to help us feel safe in the process of creation. Listen on to discover more supportive ways in which you can co-create in your life.
Allow your heart to listen.
I would really love to introduce Philippe Brouillard, and we have recently connected. So I'm very excited to discover even more of what he's got to share and what he's going to say. And as a part of our series on awakening, he is here for our explorer phase, our part where we get to explore what it is we're here to create, how we might go about doing that, and who we get to play with in that process. And so I'm very excited that he's bringing us the quantum science, some of that neurobiology science background to help inform us in that new paradigm of how it is that we're understanding consciousness. So welcome, Philippe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And so I always just like to start a little bit with just letting the listeners learn a little bit about where you're from and how you've ended up being a quantum conscious scientist, and specializing in your interest area, like what it was that inspired you to get to this place.
So I've kind of always been in spirituality. So when I'm born, my dad was a medical doctor and already in spirituality. I had spiritual class at 9. So it's kind of always been in my perspectives. So my dad was the science and the spiritual at the same time, so which is quantum physics in some ways what it is. But for like almost all my years, I was always looking for something. And that's something I didn't know. When you're very different, where you don't fit in, you're like, there's something, but sometimes the something is not easy to find. So even at some point, I had a very successful business. It was 7-figure business in the health industry, functional medicine specifically. So we were helping people from chronic pain, chronic fatigue, complex autoimmune diseases. So on paper, everything was great. Like money was there, impact was there, like purpose was there. But there was still something missing. And I was like, that's interesting. So I never stopped, but I was like, at some point, I need to get out from this glass prison. We create our own prison, like we think we're free, but we think we're aligned with our soul purpose. It's the new trend. It's like, get your business aligned with your soul purpose. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I need to get out of the business. What I want to do, I have no idea, but I need to get out. And so I start searching online to find something. I landed on a PhD again, so it's funny. I was not looking for a PhD. I hated school, but and then it was on the quantum physics, but mostly on the health industry. And I was like, I don't want to be in the health industry. I want something different. I've been in the health industry for like 27 years, or since I'm born, I can say, because of my dad. And then I landed on that PhD, which was the quantum physics of consciousness in some ways. Dr. Amit Goswami, which is my PhD mentor, it's been in the field for like 45 years. It's one of the pioneer in that space. And it's at some point the program was supposed to be called quantum psychology, but because of the structure and the people were there, like, nah, it's going to be too restricted. But for me, it's like the quantum psychology. Everything's about consciousness, and it's how we perceive and behave in the world as a being, not as a doing being, in perspective. And so I jumped both feet in. And at the first year, I was like, I think I want to quit because I understand nothing. So it's a 80 something years old when I started. I think it was 82 or something when I started. Indian person, even if he taught at university in the US for years, still Indian accent, talking about quantum stuff, who thinks that's not easy to understand. And then they asked for a student to start to teach. I'm like, I want to teach. Like the best way to learn is to teach. So let's teach. And I got the first feedback is like, finally I understand something. I was like, I was not the only one. And I see that the way I bring things, it makes a lot of sense for people. Now they understand. So I really went deep down the rabbit hole. And for me, that's changed everything at that point. So closed the business, closed a lot of different things, moved out after where we are, moved from Canada also. Now I'm living in Mexico. So a lot of things change. I was like, okay, I want to create my life out of nothing, which is create the impossible possible. The thing I speak a lot. And now it's life is just magical because life can be magical. Like quantum physics says, is the physics of possibility. Everything is possible. But then like people are like, yeah, but yes, but there's always a reason why it's not possible. And they're like going, why is not me? Yeah, but you're saying but all the time. So that's
Like,
kind of little story out of this.
yeah, you said there's a lot behind it, and
Oh yeah.
I love though that there's the key part is that sensing that there's something, right,
Yeah.
and knowing that there's something more, but you're in that pursuit of trying
Yeah.
to find it. And I feel like with the but, it once the relationship between that there's something more and the but is, to me, asking you the question of, I know, and I've seen in your work, and people who are familiar with my work will also know that, you know, we create from who we've been. We create from our memory, and
Yeah.
so that's the but, right? The but
That's
is
correct.
always the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
So how is it that you make that leap from into that unknown? How
Yeah.
do you make that leap into this unknown, not knowing what is
Yeah.
even soul aligned, because it's not even soul aligned?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, the main reason I get such crazy results in my perspective is because we're bridging the left brain and right brain. Because if we talk a little bit of neuroscience, is when we are not in coherence with our brain, the body's in survival, so it doesn't want to change. So the bodies want to stay in comfort zone, in the known and what's predictable. We all know this in neuroscience, and even our brain is always trying to predict the future. So when we're in spirituality, we're fully right brain, we're in the intuition with the feminine energy, like emotions and so on. But if we don't understand those concepts, the left brain is like freaking out because of the school system, we've been triggered to forget the right brain and fully left brain. So I'm sure most of everybody listening are fully right brain in sense they're spiritual and those kind of things, but the unconscious of the left brain is still very strong. So when we bring this gap between science and spirituality, the reptilian brain, which is the survival brain, can fully let it go and let transformation happen. So that's why, in my perspective, we don't have a science explaining this specifically, but we're all putting the piece together. It makes so much sense. And we have now the science that explains so much stuff from Hinduism, Buddhism, the shamanists, or the Kabbalah. They all saying the same thing with different words or different expression, but now we have the science explaining all of this. So even the Dalai Lama was saying spirituality without quantum physics is an incomplete picture of reality. So it's like we see it, but we're like, can we understand it? And even at the beginning of the 2000s, the Dalai Lama brought quantum physicists, neuroscientists, like a lot of different. For him, he was trying to understand, and he was leading the conversation and so on. And he was like, "That's amazing." So now we can be like, okay. So when we're talking about oneness, for example, we're like most people would say, yes, we know oneness exists. We're all one. But what does it change? So it's become just rational. We know it. It's like, but we don't live by those concepts most of the time. That's the kind of the biggest lack. So my dad went once in India, and he was in ashram with Satya Sai Baba, which was a big guru over there. He died a couple of years back, and one of his time he went there, he had the chance to ask him a question. And he said, how can you manifest things out of the physical realm so you can manifest things physically? And I cannot. He said, I know I'm God and you don't. So even in spirituality, we all know, like, I'm God, I'm like the source, I'm one. Like, we know it, but it doesn't change anything. because it's just understanding, but we're not embodying it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, to me, also, though, with that left right brain, and then that difference between the knowing and the embodying. See, I wouldn't even always say that embodiment is enough, because we can think we've embodied something, but actually, it's the knowing, yes, is the brain, the embodying, but the actual being is the difference. Is like it's actually really that wholeness.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
That is the thing that knows.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So I would say it's like knowing to meaning to embodiment, but embodiment is like, people would say, yeah, I embody it. But like real embodiment is like, that's how you are. There's no other questions about it. So that's the current of the reality of, we say today, like the new age versus like grounded, deep spiritual reality. It's very different, which is not bad in perspective. I would say I don't agree for a lot of different things, but it's a great beginning. It's a great start, even if it's not the best in some ways, but it's better to start. So whatever you're doing is perfect in what you need to do and to learn.
And it's a pathway, right? We all have to find our pathways, our ways of understanding things that help us to be able to relate, and therefore start to let it come into our body, because we need, as in Buddhism, you need the relationship in order for things to start to land within safely. And that helps it move into embodiment. And so those different pathways are really important for everyone, to find the different pathways that work at different times. Again, I guess it goes to the oneness point of many ways to explain things for the diversity that we all are, representing that oneness in the many different ways that we do.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So we can start in trying to find, okay, so what's my past? What are my traumas? What are my beliefs? And so we're trying to fix them, but we can spend like every hours of our life fixing things. But in reality, we're not broken. But that's how, like, therapies are like, you need to go in therapies because you're broken. That's kind of the unsaid thing, but that's what they're saying in reality. So if we understand that the goal of life, for example, if we go to enlightenment, that's how spiritual tradition would say the goal of life is enlightenment. Or they're saying also happiness, so that's why I use more happiness. It's more accessible because there's intertwine those two words if you look at this the sacred text. And then when you look all of this, okay, it's consciousness. It's raising consciousness. It's raising who you are. And then we understand, like, if everything is interconnected, we can talk about like quantum physics term like non-locality and entanglement, where we take electrons, we connect them, and then we separate them from the other side of the world. And what we do to one, the other one interact at the same time without the distance. There's no distance anymore. So the only way that two electrons can be instantly connected is like you're connected with yourself. That's the only way to be instant. So it's kind of a way to see that we're all interconnected without going too much details. We can talk about those concepts for hours. But so if we understand, okay, we're all interconnected. So the goal of life is like raising consciousness or enlightenment or happiness. Then everything that happens in my life is just to raise consciousness. So there's nothing broken. It's just things to learn from and bring gratitude for, okay, this is what's happening right now. Instead of like, oh no, that's not my fault. That's the other one. It's your fault. Where's the power of that?
And you're reminding me actually with that of kind of the veils, like the illusion of the veils. And it's not that you're broken. It's not that there's something to be fixed, but every time you discover that there's a part of your consciousness that is becoming lighter, there's more light coming from you, it's the removal of a veil. And so all that you've realized when something, oh my God, that trauma that happened, or that, that perspective that I've had where I've disempowered myself, is really more light coming through, and that elevation of consciousness. So it's never that anything's broken. It's only ever that there is a veil that is lifting by your awareness, and it's having the awareness, right, that is always the part of consciousness.
If you take the wick of a candle, there's no shadow. It's just light. But at time we go, we're putting stuff and we're attaching to what happened, and like we're putting blind spot in some ways or things, and then we have shadows, and we're like, why my life is so hard? Yeah, but you're just blocking yourself. There's nothing, there's no one doing it for you. You're the one doing all of this. So even if we're looking at the Buddhist perspective, they're saying the number one suffering in life is not understanding reality, not understanding life what itself. Like if we're living in, so even if we're in spirituality, we're still living in the materialistic world where we need to get stuff to feel better. And that the new tendency, even if we're spiritual, we're still stuck in this rat race of, okay, I'll do this new course. I'll be doing this new retreats. I will. And then we crave our development as an addiction instead of like being in that space, because we think we need something else to feel better. We're still living from the external realm. So people that are purely materialistic, which are not spiritual, they would buy stuff to feel better. It could be shoes, cars, a bigger house, and those kind of things. But people in spirituality would do the same thing, but yes, with positive thing. Could be books, could be retreats, could be courses, it could be singing bowls, it could be whatever it is. But we're just doing things in a different way, but it's the same thing. Because we still think we need something for external reality. But everything's happening inside. Everything is there. We're all connected to everything.
So this brings me to a question around the theme that I wanted to also tap into for us, which is, because I posed it as kind of, how can we get rid of the but, right? So that we can move into that I don't know what it is, but I know there's something, right? Collectively, we can see there's a lot of but going on, right? Like all around the world, all kinds of just like endless shadow kind of aspects that have not been tended to and cared for. And we are struggling with maybe what is that new reality that we're all going to be moving into? Like, what is a new economic system where we don't have these polarities? What are these new structures in which we're going to have different kinds of authority? Maybe, do we need to have hierarchical structures? How can we have more of that oneness structure as we come into the Aquarian age, if you were to use astrology? So many different ways and different traditions have talked about this time and how it's the end of time, but that's because it's the end of time through the but, right? Through the past lens. We're walking into, we don't know what it is. This is that exciting time of leap. And we want to ensure that people can feel empowered about, like, how do I step into that unknown and be a part of my inner work is a part of that co-creation for us all to be in oneness, of equal. And so I guess, what is that thing that someone can do that's internal, that is obviously that little bit of the electron that's affecting their other partner electron somewhere else in the world to make that change?
So you mentioned uncertainty, which is a main foundation concept in quantum physics. Everything is uncertain. But as human being, we want to control everything and we want to predict the future. We want to predict everything. So if you go see somebody that is going to tell you your future, okay, most of the time people are right. Some are like hoax and whatever it is, but some are very good at their job. But if you go see them and you have a tendency to be working on yourself a lot, they will be out of 100% for sure. Because they can only predict the future if you're staying the same. If you're staying in your comfort zone, it's easy to predict. So if I'm asking your friends, who are you? They can all describe who you are. And there's a big tendency that you'll be the same in 1 year, because people don't really change because they are a fear of the uncertainty world, of the unknown. Because in the unknown, what it tells us is like, my ego, my physical body, which I attach to my identity, won't be the same. So if it's not the same, I don't know what's going to happen. So we don't want to go there. But if we're trying to predict the future, why? Why are we having scared of what's going to happen? The only thing we can predict with 100% is tomorrow will be different than today. That's the only thing we know. And what it is, who cares? But we care because now, okay, but if I don't have this money, or if I don't have this, or if I lose this, then what's going to happen? So we live always in the survival mode for what? The survival of our ego, the survival of how people will perceive us, or so there's a big suffering in that. So why are we not okay to let go? So the main reason I would say for this, it's our attachment to our physical body. Because we believe that our physical body is what's surviving. And if it get hurt, then we get hurt. But in reality, we're not our physical body. We can talk about studies after studies after studies in spirituality. We know we have different kind of physical and spiritual bodies. We have one physical, but multiple spiritual bodies. And then if we believe in reincarnation, which is a big topic in my course where we bring all the science behind reincarnation also. So if you start believing in all of this, now I'll bring kind of the quantum electroshock, which kind of a brand I'm bringing more and more. So I'll bring Hitler, because I like to give like a huge example. So Hitler would be seen as a very bad person for most everybody on Earth. So if the goal of life is raising consciousness, and we're not physical body, but we're a soul, we can say, experience a physical reality. So what did Hitler did? Kill physical body. So it just killed kind of our vehicle to experience reality. And what happened after that? There was a huge shift in consciousness worldwide. Like oneness become more like, there's a lot of different things that came, like countries destroy walls, people came united. So what was he doing good for the movement of consciousness worldwide? Or we're just looking at what he did at the physical reality? So we're going back to the Buddhists are saying the goal of the biggest suffering is not understanding reality. So we're not living a physical reality. We're experience life through physicality, but we're not physical. So if you're fearing what's going to happen, it's because you're attaching so much to your physical body that like if something happened and that you don't have this roof, or I don't have this and this and that, then I'll suffer. Yeah, because you're attaching to stuff. So it's funny or not, when you look, so my thesis specifically for my doctorate was towards happiness, so raising consciousness. And by looking at the stats, at the data on happiness, they're saying that most happy countries are the developed countries. But when you look at the highest level of life satisfaction, it is the underdeveloped countries. I'm like, either we don't understand what's life satisfaction and happiness, or there's a difference there. And for me, if you're not satisfied in your life, how can you be happy? It does not make sense. So there's not a scientific proof in what I'm saying, but it's like by looking at things, analyzing things, what I recognize is we say ourselves happy in developed countries because we have access to material stuff. And we think that happiness is about getting stuff, getting security, which will be pleasure. In the underdeveloped countries, they have almost nothing, but they have connection, they have values, they have family. I'm living in Mexico, for example, and family is super important. Values, they have like big sense of connection with the community, which in our developed countries, usually those things does not exist. It's about competition.
Yeah. And I guess sorry, because you bring up the happiness. I actually used the World Happiness Report from 2025 as part of the setup for this series. Okay. And it was interesting because a huge part of the report talks about Latin American countries and the importance of sharing meals. So it's not even kind of the general community connection stuff we talk about. It's one of the key things is isolation at mealtime being so fundamental for social connection that helps build happiness. And a key piece that they were talking about, apart from benevolent acts being one of the key indicators of a happy society, is that people help others, is that the more isolated you feel, the less trust you have in other people. And so therefore, the less trust you have, that life supports you, right? And so therefore, the more overly controlling you're going to become,
Yeah.
Right. And so we can see that by buying things, by ticking the job, but not having the people to sit and have a meal with, the people to be able to have trust and ask for help in your life. It doesn't matter how many things you achieve, whatever external success, there's always going to be, actually, it's not even connection, it's trust. And if we don't have trust in things around us, you also don't have trust in yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And without trust, we can't feel secure. We can't let go of those fears that you were talking about that drive a lot of that unconscious behavior. Right. And so I guess a question I would have then is, how do we, other than obviously, I mean, and I have it with my clients who are American, kind of trying to encourage them to go out and connect with other people, and they'll be like, but no one will make eye contact with me, and it's like, just keep trying. I'm like, I'm definitely not of the social norm, look like a weirdo, it's fine. But it's important, I think, as things change, we want to ensure that there is trust, and trust is in our own judgment and also in being with other people. So I'm curious as to if you have something in your research that taps into trust.
So the first trust is trusting yourself. So if we would do the experiment, what I would believe is, if you're doing the eye contact exercise and one of your clients is doing it, you might see the same person and you get eye contact with them, but they don't. So remember, the observer effect in quantum physics is who you are create the manifestation, without going into details. So you're getting the eye contact because you're creating that reality. But your clients would not get them with the same person because they're not vibrating to that reality. So they're like, why you are having this? Why do you find money? For example, there's a study showing, they're asking people, how do you think you are? Like, are you, do you have chance with money, or you're
good luck?
Don't have chance. And so what they did, they do the setup, they put money on the floor with all people that are fake people in there in the restaurant. So it's kind of a montage of that reality. People, they think they're lucky, find money on the floor, and people they say that are not lucky, they don't find the money. The money was always there for everybody. It's the same thing over and over again. So the only belief, the trust. So do you trust in your capacity? Do you trust you can connect? Do you trust those kind of things? We can trust others, but if you don't trust yourself, you'll get the exact replication of who you are. So I would say you're the creator of your reality, and by you observing your reality, you understand who you are. We say it's the observer effect, but it's how I kind of bring it, which make more sense. But some would say, oh, yeah, but this is maybe on luck, or maybe this is not for me today, or then we're pushing those things away. And when Einstein says at some point, he says, like, God doesn't play dice. There's no chance. So free will is either 100%, and if it's not 100%, then it's chance. Then you're putting your power outside, and you're saying, yeah, but it's not because of me. It's because of somebody else. So one of my clients says, I decided to shift things since my husband he flatlined for 8 seconds. And I was like, do you know you're the reason why your husband flatlined for 8 seconds? She said, no, that's him. But do you create your reality, or you're not creating your reality? Yeah, but what? So at the moment you're saying you're not responsible, then you don't have free will in what's happening, and you're at the effect of things outside, then you have no power. So you think, if we call it God, says, no, sometimes you'll get chance and sometimes you'll have free will, and hey, that's not a fun game. It's like if you're playing video games and sometimes you just die for no reason. A bit frustrating. So you have like no power. Video games are predictable. You can get better and finish the whole thing. Life is the same way. It does not make sense to say, oh, sometimes there's chance. So when it is, I don't know. So who cares about working on evolving when those things happen just by luck or chance. So if you're taking 100% of responsibility, then if there's no trust outside of you, then it's just because you don't trust yourself. Because you don't trust life, or because life was mean to you. And again, you're saying like, or I'll pray to life, life will be better for me. Like, again, in one of my meditation I do to my customers, like, I taking my power back from God. When you're praying to something outside, is because you're saying you don't have this power. And you're just reinforcing that you don't have this power. So the moment you say, no, I have that power, I might not be able to use it right now because I doubt myself in reality, but the power is still there. And I go back to what my dad was said. I know I'm God and you don't. So how much do you believe that everything is possible? How much do you believe that you're trustworthy? These are only things from outside. We know like the external is our mirror. So we know those concepts, but it's like nice, rational concept that we just understand mentally, but it doesn't change anything. So knowing is not enough anymore. So we have the capacity to challenge our perspective, to debate about concept. That's a big thing I do in my program. We do this couple of times a month. I bring questions and I bring people to little groups of 3 or 4 on Zoom, and the debate on the question. And some I've saw the Materialism, haven't seen it. So it brings different concept, different things, and like people are like, oh, I never thought about this. But if you're alone reading your book, it's good, but you need to question things. You need to study.
So that makes me want to say, could you give me an example of one of your questions? So because I work a lot with contemplation, so I work a lot with encouraging people to ask open questions and allow that to open the mind and let the question not have an answer. Don't ever really look for an answer. Keep inquiring and allowing that inquiry to become almost larger in order to keep removing those glass walls that you mentioned earlier on, so that we don't cage ourselves in. And so I'd love one of your examples of a question, please.
Well, I could give a simple question is, if you think reincarnation exists, what does it change in your life? Would you change anything? Because we got stopped at the concept of, I believe in reincarnation. And it stopped there. But there's no more about understanding if you change things. When I was in Nepal for 6 weeks, I was doing 1 week doing interviews with different Buddhist monks. And that was one of the questions. If you don't believe reincarnation exists, they were always freaking out. No, it exists. I know you believe in it. But if it not, would it change anything? So I was putting them in different perspectives. So it was very interesting to see how they see life because of this. For this, because they believe in reincarnation, their life needs to devote to do greater good, because they believe in the concept of karma and those kind of things. So just knowing the concept, but how do you embody them? How do you start living for those concepts? What's oneness? Oh yeah, we are all interconnected. Yeah, but every time you pollute it, it's because you live in duality and you think nature is not connected to you. And I went to a big event. There were 2,000 people. Everybody was polluting every day, but they're not connected to that because they don't understand the concept or they don't question. For example, we go back to Buddhism. The big question was, what's education in Buddhism? How is it structured? They read a sacred text. They meditate on it. They're going to read again the text. They're going to debate on it. They do the concept of like being and doing all the time. We're like, we're going to read 50 books in a year. Yay. Just information, no meaning at all, no questioning. Read just 5 books a year and question it, read it, take notes, discuss about it, do a book club. That's the thing. When I launch my books, there people are saying, what's your number 1 comments? Like, create a book club. That's the cheapest thing you can do from a book to get meaning from it. Because you're going to debate about it, you're going to discuss about it, they're going to be, oh yeah, I didn't see this. Oh yeah, but how you're seeing it? You can do it by yourself. But why not doing it together?
And it's funny you say that. It reminds me, it's like the success of someone like Oprah is through her book clubs and doing them at large scale, right? Because it brings people together. Everyone can, go through reading it in sections, sharing. Then they get the author in to talk about it, and sometimes people are reading things that the author had no intention kind of actually being behind the book, but it's amazing what comes out. And that comes back to what you were saying earlier around perception. Right. And how our perception changes and evolves. And really what life is reflecting at you is your current perception. And what is there in your current perception that you don't like, right? That you could put more light on and let that shift.
Yeah. So if you go, the goal of life is evolution. So you're the one creating reality. So you're the one creating hard time. You're the one creating disease. You're the one creating all of this. And the only reason you're doing it is to evolve. So you should have gratitude for everything happening in your life. One of my friends in Canada, which she wrote a book in French called The Gift of Cancer. She got a breast cancer. And she was in the TV industry and that media world. And for her, that was like the waking call. I'm like, without this, I was like dying in that space, but I didn't know. I was kind of happy with pleasure and like those parties and this. It's a reality that you live in, which is, I call the glass prison, and we're stuck in there, but we're comfortable. So we find comfort in our suffering because we know we can predict it. And she got that cancer, and that was changed everything for her. And there's so many examples like this from cancer. Like usually the biggest the disease is, the biggest the alarm. And so there's studies showing like instant remission because the person got a cancer. And then somebody tells you, oh, you have 3 months to live. So he's like, goodbye, husband. Goodbye, kids. I'm moving somewhere in the world and fuck it. And then 5 years later, everything is fine. She never got a surgery. She never got anything, and she's healed. Because what? She changed her own reality. She's the one creating her reality. But the reality is creating her at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm fan and not fan of retreats, because when you go to retreats for 7 days, you change your own reality. You say, oh, that was amazing. And then you go back to your own reality and you're like, shit. And then I'm like, I need to register to the next retreat. So you're not working on yourself in your reality, but you're like living in a lab for a week where like it's amazing, yes, but it's working on yourself in your reality, which is the strongest and the hardest.
You make me laugh because you remind me of one of the early retreats that I ran when I used to do massage on my retreats. And I had, you have clients and I come in, they massage, and, sometimes chat happens, like something comes up. And at that time, like I channel when I'm massaging, but just in general, but it can be very strong when I touch a body. So I might say something, and I'm always very careful with what I say stuff. I don't like to ever suggest anyone do anything in their life. Like it's their power of choice and I want their free will ultimately. And I was in England teaching a workshop at a friend's yoga studio, different part of England, nowhere near where I was. I was living in Australia at the time anyway. And these two women came to the workshop who had been at that retreat with me. And they were so excited to tell me about how their lives had completely changed, left their husbands, left the job, like full, like done it all. And it was, thank you so much, Nid, for that thing that you said. I came back and I realized I can't stay in this anymore. And I was like, oh God, what did I say? Because it's exactly that, when you see someone very clearly and you can say something very simple and sow a seed, right? But whether or not someone has the courage, and I really do think a lot of it is courage, to take that leap into the unknown and to trust that that leap is the right thing, and just to trust themselves that they can pick themselves up should they have a bit of a splat on that leap and that they can cope with it. That to me, I think is how do we get more people to do that without the getting cancer? So I'd love to close with like, what is your way of encouraging someone to take that leap? How do you get them to have sufficient trust in themselves to move on?
So I'll bring a study that I've took out from my thesis So at the end of the program, I was asking, how happy are you right now versus how were you happy at the beginning? So I was asking that question specifically at the end because they didn't know what happiness is at the beginning. So, and then there was a second question is, did you experience any very stressful event like a divorce, loss of job, somebody close dying, somebody close getting a big disease, and so on? And the people that said no experienced approximately a shift of 20% in overall happiness. And the people that said yes, we're talking about like 70%, which is here is a paradox. Usually high stress bring unhappiness and disease and so on, but in that case, it shifts the opposite. Because what they understand now what life is. The understanding that those stressful events are opportunity for growth. So it's showing that when you're in the uncertainty reality, it's just experience to grow. So I become 21st in Canada in mogul skiing, not by keeping things simple, by pushing things to the limit, going outside the comfort zone, failing, having hurt, hurting myself, and so on. Because I was going outside of what's comfortable, outside of what's predictable, and this is how you learn. All kids learn this way. They fail and they stand up. But as adults, we're like, we don't want to fail anymore. Just go play. Just go see the world and experience like failing all the time. And that's, we know in business, the best way to be a businessman is failing. But we don't want to fail. Because F on your exam means you're a failure, but it doesn't mean anything. So we're all so stuck with those paradoxes of failing and playing and those kind of things. But life is about growth. Who cares of what other thinks of you? It's because you think of that. So just be embracing uncertainty, just loving those concepts, and just having gratitude when you're failing. This would change your whole world. You can just play with that. You don't need course, you don't need anything. Just doing this. But that's the hardest. But it's simple. But then but I cannot do this. And then you have a million reasons why you're not doing it. So it's kind of simple. Or just read a book or buy my book and just do a book club with it.
Awesome. I love that suggestion. And I was going to say, is there any final thing you'd like to say, Philippe? But I feel like buy the book and get a book club going is actually
that's the simplest, cheapest way you could do. It's this. But just don't buy the book and read the book alone. For me, this is kind of worthless. It's it's $20 a book, but the biggest value is exchanging the concept, debating about it. If you look at the best debater in the world, how they see the world is very interesting, because they're looking at they don't go to a competition knowing on which side they will be. They need to understand the big picture. They need to understand the thing, which we never question things, because that's cool. Raising a question is not a good thing. Teacher doesn't like question, especially if they cannot answer it. So it's no question is kind of the rule in school. So question things. It's an easy way to do this. So yeah, the book is Rethinking Happiness. It might be upside down now.
No, it's perfect.
The other one is in French.
And I'll put a link to it underneath.
And so I don't know when this going to be out, but I'm launching a free course called the Quantum Exploration to understand more of the concept of the foundations. Everything is available right now in French, but launching everything in English as we speak almost. So yeah.
Excellent.
Challenging we are, it's just magical.
And this is the thing, right? It's creating by challenging, by questioning, and not ever looking for a fixed outcome, I think is the best way to be a creative person, is just just keep letting it evolve, let it unfold. And, trying to be too niche, too brand, to all of those things that we often talk about, that's exactly what can stop that creativity and therefore building confidence, right? And then from the confidence, we build more trust. We have more that we can become. And so just like you say, start small, start simple, start sharing ideas, being wrong, having other people's opinions, opening your own mind. And with that, we can let go, right, of taking ourselves too seriously. A bit of humility is always good in there as well, right? Of, misunderstanding something.
Correct. Yeah. If you want to manifest something, You don't want to say, okay, I want to manifest something that I know I can manifest. There's nothing there. I talk a lot about the quantum intention, where if we keep it in the regular terms, like the moon intention, like John F. Kennedy going to the podium and say, we're going to the moon. Everybody's like, he's crazy. Then you're going to say things to your friend. They're going to say you're crazy. And you're like, oh yeah, you might be right. So stop dreaming. But that's how people are. They stop dreaming. And it's where the quantum magic happen is when things doesn't make sense. Because then you have space for creativity, for manifestation, for synchronicity, and all those things become possible. But when you're manifesting from the Newton wave, where everything is cause and effect, takes time, it takes space, there's no magic there. There's no magic there. But that's how we are, because it's predictable. We can know what to expect. So me, I put always crazy goals for my business, and my employees are like, yeah, but it's perfect. It doesn't make sense. If we make it, who cares? So we're not attached to the results. It's about transforming. And I can turn right, and next week I'm going to turn left because I change idea, because there's something else. That's fine.
And I think this is a perfect example of my senses of what that new economy, what that new way in which we're going to exist is going to look more like. And so the more grounded in who you are and what your actual power is going to really be the key piece, right, in our consciousness evolution. And so thank you so much, Philippe. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I could continue talking to you for much longer, but I'm very mindful of your time. And so thank you ever so much. I will pop how people can connect with you beneath, as well as your book, so that they can find that and the course when it is released in English, for anyone who speaks French. And I do have clients and people who do speak French, so I'm sure they can find it in French too. But otherwise, is there any final word that you'd like to share?
Just jump in the unknown. Just be bold. That's the real courage. Not jumping in a parachute. That's insanity. Courage is facing who you are. That's the beauty of life.
Thank you, Philippe. That's beautiful. Thanks ever so much. Take care.
Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful day.